You know, as football fans, one thing that we love is the gadget plays, a little bit of trickery and deception by the offense that or the defense, but we love to see it happen. Sometimes it makes an unfair advantage to the other team, and the officials have to call a penalty. But it is so much fun to watch and see the innovations and imaginations of coaches. We're going to go back some 100 years ago with Timothy P. Brown of football archaeology to look at one of the most famous trickeration plays ever. And it's all coming up with Tim in just a moment.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Before we get started with our story today, let me remind you that you can subscribe and know exactly when one of our podcasts or our YouTube videos drops. Hit that subscribe button right now and the notification bell. You'll know right when we drop it. Now to our story. Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome to another edition where we get to visit with Timothy P. Brown of FootballArchaeology.com on a Tuesday and talk about some gridiron from yesteryear and some great aspects of the game. And Tim's got some great stories today in our edition. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Good to see you. And what could I use as a dad joke? I think I'm out of luck. I don't think I have anything.
Yeah, I think you're tricked out.
Yeah, that's
I figured that's where you were setting yourself up for, but of course, Tim. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that I was being the straight man in this little comedy routine.
And usually those don't work out so well when you're the straight man and I'm telling the jokes. Your delivery is much better than mine. But of course, we're trying to segue into one of very poorly, I might add, into Tim's great article that he wrote back in July 5th called "The Helmet Tossing Trickeration," which sounds like a mouthful here, and I'm sure we'll have a few more laughs and learn a lot about some football here with this story.
Yeah, so I will take a moment, hopefully in the very near future. My next book, A History of the Football, will be released and available for sale by football history enjoying public. Anyways, one of the things that I cover in that book is when and why stripes arrived on the ball. And so stripes basically appeared on footballs for two reasons. One is that they were added to help people see the ball when they played night games or when they practiced at dusk. A lot of times they just would paint a ball white or yellow, but those were slick and slippery. And so adding a stripe, they thought would cause less problems with the slickness of the ball. So part of it, white stripe or a black stripe on a white ball was just to help people see at night. But the other reason was to eliminate kind of a camouflage effect. And so the stripes got added in the 20s, mostly in the 30s. But back then teams were just starting to wear white jerseys on a fairly regular basis. Stanford was one of those teams, but so if you used a white ball at night, it was like, okay, well, the opponent was like, well, we can't see the ball because you got white jerseys. And then and the same thing kind of happened with the brown ball. Teams, not many teams wore brown or tan jerseys, but almost everybody was wearing pants that were earth tones. They were khaki, so they were, they were the khaki color, or they were brown, or they were, some kind of a greenish, brownish blob. And so it would sometimes be hard to see the ball against that background. And so, and they were also, a lot of teams were wearing, there were friction strips, but before the friction strips, they'd wear those like pieces of leather that were kind of oval looking on their jerseys. And so anyways, for those reasons, it was sometimes hard, you'd lose sight of the ball because of the uniform that the opponent was wearing. So so that was a problem. And in that time, there was also some trickeration that was going on. This is in the 20s and 30s, but there was an older trickeration that had occurred back in 1909, which is really the focus of this tidbit. It's just taken me a little while to get there. So back in 1909, Virginia Tech and North Carolina were playing a game, and Virginia Tech had three brothers named, well, their last name was Hodgson. And one of the guys was E.R. Hodgson, and he was the right guard. Vivian Hodgson ends up, scoring the first TD in the game, and ER, the guard, moves back to be the kicker. This is not him, but I figured I'd put a kicker out here. And so he converts the kick. So Virginia Tech's leading. 5 minutes later, Virginia Tech is on the 35, and E.R. Hodgson sets up again to kick, this time a field goal. And rather than, as a snap is made, Hodgson, the kicker, pulls off his brown leather helmet, which is basically the same color as the football, and he tosses the helmet over the right side of the line so that the NC State players would think that he was throwing a football. And instead, he was throwing a helmet, obviously, but the holder got the ball, and he ran around the left side of the Virginia, or of the NC State line, and goes for a 35-yard touchdown. So it's just, this is one of these things where the helmets look enough like a football in terms of just the tanning of the leather that you could throw your helmet and people would think it was a football. Wouldn't work very well today, but it did back then. And then late in the second half, he sets up again and to place kick another field goal, and the ball gets snapped. Instead of going to the holder, the ball gets snapped to the E.R. Hodgson, the kicker. And it's hard to, the way they describe it, it's not entirely clear whether, but he handed it off to the quarterback, who maybe was positioned out at a wing position. And it was either like in a draw or a Statue of Liberty sort of play. But the quarterback went for a 75-yard run, So here's poor NC State. They thought they were playing a pretty good game until they saw a ball flying over the left side of the defensive line. Turns out to be a helmet, not a ball. And then they get the old Statue of Liberty play, which was then a new play, pulled on them. So, 2 long touchdown runs, and unfortunately, for them anyways, Virginia Tech won. But so the one of the other sidelights to this is that these trick plays, throwing the helmet around, people continued doing that a bit. And in like the late 20s, there was some guy, I've never figured out who he is, some guy, but he apparently played somewhere in the South. And he was a running back, he'd take his helmet off and toss it to the ground, sometime close to being tackled, because then some of the defenders would think it was a loose ball, go for the helmet instead of trying to tackle him. And so then that was when they implemented a rule that said every team has to paint their helmets with some kind of striping, cross stripes, or like, kind of like the Michigan Wolverine, type of helmet. You had to have some contrasting colors painted on the top of your helmet so it didn't look like a football. So anyways, that's that's all I know. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, that's quite a mouthful there of what you just said. I mean, some great stories. First of all, you almost got to think back how almost every episode of the A Team ended back in the '80s, where Hannibal would say, "I love it when a plan comes together." It sounds like those Trickeration plays were to their peak performance there, on
Yeah.
both of them getting a big touchdown plays, helping them win the game. But the other thing is, you got almost got to think, it's hard for our modern sensibilities to say, okay, a player's taking off their helmet in the middle of a play, even in between plays when they're on the field, nowadays celebration, they get 15-yard
Yeah.
penalty. So
Yeah.
obviously that was not the rule back in that era.
Well, you didn't even have to have a helmet, at that point. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
people well, actually in like '09, probably most players didn't wear one. Maybe half did. It probably depended on the team. But, certainly in the 20s and 30s, then pretty much everybody was wearing them. But um, like that Tommy McDonald dude, I think he was the last one to play without a helmet. I'm pretty sure that was him. Maybe I'm getting him mixed up with some. No, he was the last one to play without a face mask. That's what it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, okay. Yeah. And okay, I think you alluded to it a little bit, and I think this is what you were talking about. If you go back, back more towards the turn of the century, where the players, the standard equipment was, they were wearing like the vests, like the leather vests, and then the moleskin pants were that tannish color, like you're talking about, and the football. So, I mean, that era, and I think all teams were wearing. I don't think they had different color vests. It was all the same
Yeah.
color. That had to be really challenging for a defense to be able to follow the ball and run the ball every play too.
Yeah. I mean, so, you basically had to rely on, everybody wore long sleeve sweaters or jerseys, and then they'd have a stripe or they'd have socks of the same color. So that was a primary way to tell. And it's like, you know, eventually college players kind of went to the no hose or no stocking look. They just have like the white sock, right?
Mhm.
And but back then everybody was still wearing shin guards, and so the early on they'd wear them over their socks, and then they started wearing them under their socks. But I think the socks probably helped keep them on, and it was just a better look instead of having the shin guards.
But I was coming from the aspect of just trying to follow the ball. When you have your
Sure.
midsection
Yeah.
and your lower, portions of your body are consumed with the same color as the football, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's 22 guys on the field like that. That's had to be extremely hard to, as a defender, to follow where that ball is.
Yeah. And half the time they were running it up the gut. So it's like, yeah, how they figured out who had the ball sometimes, who knows?
And they weren't the nice clean fields that we see today either. I'm sure most of them were just mud pits,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially the end of the season.
Yeah. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Huh. Some interesting stuff, and some things that we really have to appreciate that our football forefathers had to go through and experience, both in the elements and by rules, and some of the craziness of the absence of color in the uniforms, and the stripes on the ball. We
Yeah.
take for granted. Uh, of course, the NFL doesn't have the stripes, but most every other level that has some form of a stripe on there. Now, I guess that's the other thing. I'm sitting there trying to envision when they were putting stripes on balls back in the early 20s. It's not like they had, you know, masking tape and spray paint that they could put it on. So I'm assuming somebody's got to almost like detail this, with a stripe
Yeah.
with a brush, and
Yeah.
very
I mean,
little template.
somebody with a steady hand and some kind of tape or something. But, I mean, when the manufacturers got involved too, it's like, again, this is another thing I talk about in the book, but it's like, where do you put the stripes? Right? How many
Yeah.
stripes? Do you have one stripe? Do you have two stripes? Do you have three stripes? Um, do they go just one way or do they go the long way? I mean, so that there's these things that we take for granted that, well, of course the white stripe goes there. Well, no, that's an arbitrary place. I mean, there's probably reason why they ended up where they ended up, but um, I mean, they were just trying stuff, so it's like, Billy, go paint white stripes on the ball. Okay, boss. And, Billy went and did it.
And
Nobody
yeah,
told him how far it was supposed to be
and
from,
how wide the stripes had to be
yeah,
or anything like
yeah.
that. Yeah, I think if
So,
I had to do it, it would probably look like a melted lightning bolt going around there. I'm sure it
yeah.
wouldn't be
Oh, no,
going around. That'd be a
totally.
tough thing to do on an odd shaped
Well,
ball like that.
I've got some images of the striping on the field as well that sometimes was not quite as straight as one might like.
Well,
They just,
I've experienced that in modern times when on the grass fields, it's kind of hard to do measurements. That's for sure when you have some of those crazy crooked lines in there. But hey, it's probably a better job than I would do, so I
yeah,
can't complain
yeah,
too much. So. Yeah, so Tim, just another great way to look back at an aspect of football that it's hard for us to appreciate, but it happened, and some of the things that people had to overcome playing the game that they love, just like we love it today, and we love just hearing about this history. But you have some multi times a week, you have some of these things coming up and writing articles on it, and maybe you could tell the listeners how they can enjoy some of these.
sure. Just go to footballarchaeology.com, subscribe. All you got to do is submit an email address, and you'll start getting them every week, or every time that I post one. Some of the stuff that I do, only paid subscribers get access to it, but a lot of it is available for free. So that's the best way. You can also follow me on Twitter, on Threads, or on the Substack app.
All right, and keep us posted when that book comes out so we can get the word out and get that in people's hands and enjoy the history of football and some of the aspects you learned about today. And we'll go, I'm sure, in better detail in the book. So, Tim, we'd love to have you again next week, and we thank you for joining us today.
Very good. Thanks, Darren.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.